Commander Thelvok had fought in 63 battles across 4 star systems. He had seen his soldiers die in the cold vacuum of space. He had led charges against enemy positions that seemed impossible to take. He had earned every medal the Valorian Empire could give. In 300 years of war against the Drakthar horde, he thought he understood what courage looked like. He was wrong. The humans arrived on a Tuesday, by their own calendar. Their ship was smaller than Thelvok expected. It was called the Wandering Star, a name that seemed too gentle for a warship. The vessel docked with the Valorian flagship Starbound Resolve, with a soft clunk that echoed through the loading bay. Thelvok stood with his aide, Sub-Commander Irelna, watching the airlock cycle open. He had read the files on humans. A young species. Barely 200 years in space, soft bodies with no natural armor, no claws, no venom. They needed machines just to breathe in most environments. The Valorian High Council had accepted their offer of military help only because the war was going badly. 3 centuries of fighting had drained both sides. Any assistance was welcome, even from such fragile creatures. The airlock opened, and the humans walked out. There were 42 of them. They wore armor that looked heavy and crude compared to Valorian technology. Their faces were visible through clear helmets, and Thelvok noticed something strange immediately. They were smiling. The one in front removed his helmet. He had short brown hair and pale skin with small scars on his jaw. His eyes moved quickly, taking in everything around him. When he spotted Thelvok, he walked over with a relaxed stride that seemed wrong for a military officer. "Commander Thelvok," the human said, "I'm Captain Daniel Cole. This is my second-in-command, Lieutenant Amy Reyes." The woman beside him nodded. She was shorter than Cole, with dark hair pulled back tight against her head. Her eyes were different from his. Where Cole seemed open and friendly, Reyes looked like she was calculating something, always calculating. "Welcome aboard," Thelvok said. He kept his voice formal. "The High Council appreciates your assistance in this conflict." Cole grinned. "Happy to help. My people have been looking for a good fight." Thelvok did not know what to say to that. Looking for a fight? What kind of species looked for war? The next few days were filled with briefings. Thelvok explained the situation on Kethris 4, a contested world where the Drakthar had built a supply depot. The depot fed their forces across 3 systems. Destroying it would cripple their offensive for months. Cole and Reyes listened carefully. They asked questions that surprised Thelvok, not just about enemy numbers and positions, but about the terrain, the weather, the morale of Drakthar soldiers. They wanted to know everything. "Your soldiers," Reyes said during one session, "how do they handle close combat?" "We avoid it when possible," Thelvok replied. "The Drakthar are larger and stronger than us. We prefer to engage at range." Reyes nodded slowly. "And if range isn't an option? Then we take heavy casualties." The humans exchanged a look that Thelvok could not read. He began observing the human soldiers during their preparation. They were strange. They laughed too much. They made jokes about death. One soldier, a large man named Kevin Burke, was checking his weapons while humming a tune. When Thelvok asked what he was doing, Burke smiled and said he was getting ready for the dance. "Dance?" Thelvok asked. "Combat," Burke explained. "That's what my grandfather called it. The dance. You move, they move. Somebody falls." Another soldier, a young man named Lucas Grant, was writing something on a piece of paper. Thelvok learned it was a letter to his family. Grant wrote one before every mission. Just in case, he said. Just in case he died. And he said it like he was talking about the weather. The night before the assault, Thelvok found Captain Cole alone in the observation deck, looking at the planet below. Kethris IV was an ugly world, black rock and poison air. Nothing worth fighting for except strategy. "Captain," Thelvok said, "may I ask you something?" "Sure. Your soldiers. They seem unconcerned about tomorrow." Cole turned to face him. "Unconcerned? They joke. They laugh. We are about to fight a battle where many will die, and they act like it is a celebration." Cole was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that stayed with Thelvok for the rest of his life. "Commander, my people have been fighting wars since before we could write. We've killed each other over land, over ideas, over things we can't even remember anymore. We've gotten very, very good at it." He paused. "The joking, the laughing, that's how we cope. Because if we thought too hard about what's coming, we'd never be able to do what needs to be done." "And what needs to be done?" "Whatever it takes." The dropships launched at dawn. 12 vessels carrying Valorian and human soldiers toward the black surface of Kethris IV. Thelvok commanded from the lead ship. Cole and his humans were in the vessel beside his. As they descended through the toxic clouds, Thelvok watched the human ship through his viewport. Inside, he knew 42 soldiers were preparing to fight. Some of them would not return. They knew this. They accepted it. The comm crackled. Cole's voice came through, calm and steady. "Starbound units, this is Cole. Remember your training. Watch your corners. And look out for each other." A pause. "See you on the ground." Thelvok noticed something in his tone. Not fear, not bravado, something else. Something that sounded almost like hunger. The ships broke through the clouds. The depot came into view, a dark structure surrounded by defensive walls and gun emplacements. Drakthar warriors moved between buildings, preparing for the attack they knew was coming. Thelvok gave the order to land. As the ships touched down and the doors opened, he looked over at the human vessel. The ramp was dropping. The soldiers were emerging. They were smiling. Not the nervous smiles of frightened soldiers pretending to be brave. These were different. These were the smiles of predators who had finally found their prey. For the first time in his long career, Commander Thelvok felt a small chill run through him, not because of the enemy waiting in the depot, because of the allies walking beside him. The first shots came before anyone expected them. Thelvok was leading his soldiers toward the eastern wall when the ground erupted in plasma fire. Hidden guns, buried beneath the black rock, opened up on the Valorian left flank. 3 squads went down in the first volley. Soldiers screamed as superheated energy tore through their armor. Thelvok dropped behind a rock formation, his heart's pounding. This was a trap. The Drakthar had known they were coming. "Left flank is pinned," Irelna reported through the comm. "They're caught in the open. No cover." Thelvok looked at the tactical display on his wrist. 23 Valorian soldiers were trapped in a kill zone. The hidden guns had perfect angles. Any rescue attempt would mean more deaths. He was about to order a retreat when a human voice cut through the channel. "Cole here. We see them. Burke, smoke those positions. Reyes, take second squad and go left. Everyone else, follow me." Thelvok watched in disbelief as the humans broke from cover. They did not run for safety. They ran toward the guns. Sergeant Burke stood up in plain view of the enemy. He carried a weapon that looked too large for any soldier to hold. When he fired, the entire area in front of him disappeared in a wall of white smoke. The hidden guns went blind. "Move! Move! Move!" Captain Cole shouted. The humans sprinted across the open ground. Plasma bolts flew through the smoke, hitting nothing. Lieutenant Reyes led half the squad around the left side, disappearing into the chaos. Cole took the rest straight up the middle. Thelvok heard himself giving orders. Valorian soldiers began advancing, using the smoke as cover to rescue their trapped comrades, but his eyes stayed on the humans. Private Lucas Grant was running at the front of Cole's group. A plasma bolt caught him in the shoulder. The impact spun him around. He fell. Then he got up. Blood was pouring down his arm. His face was twisted in pain, but he got up, picked up his rifle, and kept running. The humans reached the gun emplacements. Thelvok could hear the fighting through his comm, even over the chaos of the larger battle. Gunfire, screaming, the terrible wet sounds of close combat. Then silence. "Guns are down," Cole reported. His voice was steady, like he was ordering food. "Advancing on the main structure." The battle became a blur after that. Thelvok led his forces through the smoke toward the depot walls. Valorian soldiers breached the eastern gate while humans poured through the holes they had made in the western defenses. Inside the depot, the fighting was worse. The Drakthar were waiting. They were big, almost twice the size of a human. Their skin was covered in thick scales that could stop small weapons. Their claws could cut through armor. They fought with a fury that Thelvok had seen many times before. What he had not seen was how humans fought back. Corporal Nina Santos was working as a medic, dragging wounded soldiers to cover while firing her weapon with one hand. A Drakthar warrior charged at her, claws raised. She did not run. She shot it in the face, stepped over its body, and kept moving. Private Chris Dunn, the young soldier who played music on the ship, was fighting 3 enemies at once. He was bleeding from a cut on his head. He was smiling. Burke had abandoned his heavy weapon. It was empty. Now he was fighting hand-to-hand against a Drakthar twice his size. The creature had claws and teeth and scales. Burke had his fists and his rage. Burke won. Thelvok found himself fighting beside Captain Cole in a narrow corridor. Drakthar warriors were coming from both directions. There was no room to retreat, no space to maneuver, just violence. Cole moved like water. Every motion was efficient. Every shot found its target. When his weapon ran dry, he drew a knife and kept fighting. When a Drakthar grabbed him, he twisted free and put the blade through the creature's eye. "Having fun, Commander?" Cole asked, reloading his rifle. Thelvok did not answer. He was too busy trying to understand what he was seeing. The depot fell in 40 minutes. 40 minutes. The Valorian military had estimated 3 hours minimum. Some analysts had said it could not be taken at all. 40 minutes. When it was over, Thelvok walked through the ruins counting the dead. 11 Valorian soldiers had fallen. A tragedy, but expected in such a battle. 2 humans had died. Only 2. And both of them had died protecting Valorian wounded who could not protect themselves. Thelvok found Cole helping load injured soldiers onto medical transports. The captain had 3 wounds that were still bleeding. He had not stopped to treat them. "Captain," Thelvok said, "you should see a medic." Cole looked down at his injuries like he had forgotten about them. Later, "Your people need the beds more than I do." "Why did you do it?" "Do what?" Thelvok struggled to find the words. "The charge, the guns. You risked everything for soldiers you had just met. Soldiers who are not even your species." Cole stopped what he was doing. He looked at Thelvok with genuine confusion on his face. "They're our allies," he said simply. "That's all that matters." That night, Thelvok could not sleep. He went to the ship's database and began reading about human history. He read for hours. He read about their wars, thousands of them, wars over territory, over religion, over ideas, over nothing at all. Humans had been killing each other for their entire existence as a species. He read about their weapons. Each generation invented new ways to destroy. Swords became guns. Guns became bombs. Bombs became weapons that could burn entire cities in a flash of light. He read about their heroes. Soldiers who charged into certain death. Leaders who sacrificed everything for their people. Ordinary humans who did extraordinary things because someone had to. And he understood something terrible. The Valorians had been fighting the Drakthar for 300 years. They had learned war through necessity. Humans had been practicing for their entire existence. War was not something they did. War was something they were. Thelvok closed the database and sat in the darkness of his quarters. Tomorrow there would be more planning, more battles, more death. And he would be fighting beside humanity. He was no longer sure if that was a blessing or a curse. A week passed after the depot fell. The Joint Force regrouped on the Starbound Resolve while planning their next attack. Intelligence said the Drakthar were building a command center on a moon called Vethra. If the Allies could take it, the war might finally turn. Thelvok spent the week trying to understand the humans. He watched them between battles. They were different when they were not fighting. Softer somehow. They laughed at things that made no sense to Valorian ears. They argued about small things and then forgot the arguments an hour later. They shared food and stories like old friends, even though some of them had met only months ago. Private Chris Dunn played his instrument every evening. It made sounds that Thelvok found strange at first, but after a few nights he began to understand. The music was sad and happy at the same time. It was about being alive. Corporal Nina Santos taught Valorian soldiers a human game using small pieces of paper with pictures on them. The rules were complicated, but the Valorians enjoyed it. Santos laughed when they made mistakes, but not in a cruel way. She laughed like a teacher watching students learn. Private Lucas Grant still wrote letters before every mission. His shoulder was healing, but he would carry the scar forever. When Thelvok asked if the wound bothered him, Grant shrugged. "Got plenty more room for scars," he said. Sergeant Burke was the strangest of all. Thelvok had seen him fight like a demon. He had watched Burke kill enemies with his bare hands. But between battles, Burke was gentle. He fed the small animals that lived in the ship's hydroponics bay. He helped the cooks in the kitchen. He told jokes that made everyone groan. "How do you do it?" Thelvok asked him one day. "How do you kill so easily and then become this?" Burke thought about it. "Killing isn't easy," he said. "It's just necessary sometimes. And when it's over, you have to remember why you do it. I fight so people can laugh and cook and feed little animals. If I forgot that, I'd just be a monster." But it was Lieutenant Reyes who frightened Thelvok the most. He watched her plan the next mission. She sat alone in the tactical room, studying maps and reports. Her fingers moved across the display, marking positions and routes. She spoke to herself in numbers. Casualty estimates, success probabilities, time calculations. She talked about death like it was just another variable. "If we approach from the north, we lose 6 soldiers in the first 2 minutes, she said when Thelvok joined her. From the east, we lose 4, but it takes twice as long. From the south, we lose 12, but the mission succeeds 30% faster. "Does it not disturb you?" Thelvok asked. "Speaking of your soldiers' lives like numbers?" Reyes looked at him with those calculating eyes. "It disturbs me every day, Commander, but someone has to make these choices. If I let my feelings cloud my judgment, more people die." She paused. "The best thing I can do for my soldiers is think clearly, even when it hurts." Captain Cole was quieter than the others. He checked on his soldiers constantly, asking about their health, their families, their worries. He knew every name, every story. When decisions needed to be made, he made them quickly. When mistakes happened, he took responsibility. One evening, Thelvok saw Cole sitting alone in the observation deck, staring at the stars. There was something heavy in his expression, something tired. "The burden of command," Thelvok said, sitting beside him. Cole nodded. "I've lost soldiers before. You never get used to it. Yet you continue." "What choice is there?" Cole asked. "If I stop, someone else has to carry it. And maybe they're not ready. Maybe they break. So I keep going, and I try to bring as many home as I can." The assault on Vethra came 3 days later. Intelligence had been wrong. The Drakthar were ready. They had twice the soldiers that the report suggested. The landing zone was a kill box. The Valorians lost 2 dropships before they even touched the ground. Thelvok watched them explode, saw the names of dead soldiers scrolling across his display. His heart sank. Then the humans landed. They came down in the middle of the fire, their ships taking hit after hit. One vessel was burning when it touched the ground. The soldiers inside kicked open the doors and charged out anyway, flames on their backs, guns in their hands. The Drakthar had set an ambush in the main approach. They waited until the first wave of soldiers was in the open, then opened fire from hidden positions. Half of the human first squad died in seconds. The survivors did not retreat. Thelvok watched through his tactical display as the humans adapted. They did not panic. They did not freeze. In the time it took him to give a single order, the humans had already spread out, found cover, and started returning fire. Private Grant crawled through enemy fire to reach a fallen soldier. The soldier was already dead, but Grant took something from around his neck, a small metal tag, before crawling back. He was crying. Thelvok could see the tears streaming down his face, but his hands never stopped reloading his rifle. Corporal Santos took a blast to her leg. She fell, screaming. 2 Valorian soldiers tried to help her, but she waved them away. "I'm fine," she said through gritted teeth. "Keep moving. I'll catch up." She tied something around her leg to stop the bleeding. Then she stood up and limped forward, still fighting. By the time the sun set on Vethra, the command center was in Allied hands, but the cost was terrible. The Valorians had lost over 100 soldiers. The humans had lost 14. That night, Thelvok found the humans holding a ceremony. They stood in a circle around 14 small lights, one for each fallen soldier. Cole spoke their names one by one. The others listened in silence. Some of them were crying. They did not hide it. They did not pretend to be strong. When the last name was spoken, there was a long moment of silence. Then Burke began to sing. It was a sad song, slow and heavy. The others joined in, their voices rough with grief. When the song ended, Cole wiped his eyes. He took a deep breath. And then, in a voice that was steady despite the tears on his face, he said, "Tomorrow we plan the next operation. Tonight we remember them. Get some rest." Sub-Commander Irilna appeared beside Thelvok. She had been watching too. "I have fought the Drakthar my entire life," she said quietly. "They are brutal, savage. I have feared them since I was young." She looked at the humans walking back to their quarters, their shoulders bowed with grief, but their steps still steady. "The humans frighten me more." Thelvok said nothing. He was beginning to understand why. The war reached its turning point at Vethkan Station. It was an orbital platform, massive and ancient, floating in the darkness between 3 star systems. Whoever controlled Vethkan controlled the movement of fleets across half the galaxy. The Drakthar had held it for 2 centuries. They had filled it with their best warriors and their heaviest weapons. Taking it would change everything. The problem was simple math. The Drakthar had 12,000 soldiers on the station. The Allied fleet could land perhaps 3,000, 4-to-1 odds. Valorian military doctrine said this was beyond acceptable loss limits. The battle could not be won. High Command sent the order, tactical withdrawal, regroup, find another way. Captain Cole requested a meeting with Thelvok. They met in the tactical room, just the 2 of them. Cole had a plan. Thelvok could see it in his eyes before he even spoke. "We can take the station," Cole said. "The odds—" "I know the odds. We can still take it." Thelvok stared at him. "Even if you succeed, survival is nearly impossible. You would be asking your soldiers to die." Cole was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that Thelvok would remember for the rest of his life. "Commander, my species landed on our moon in a metal box held together with hope and math. We split the atom, nearly ended ourselves, and then figured out how to use it for power instead of destruction. We crossed oceans in wooden ships because we wanted to know what was on the other side." He met Thelvok's eyes. "We're not good at accepting that something can't be done." "This is not a moon landing, Captain. This is a battle you cannot win." Every human who ever changed history heard those words. They did it anyway. The request went up the chain of command. High Command said no. Cole asked again. High Command said no again, more firmly. Cole asked for volunteers. Every human stepped forward. All 28 of them. Every single one. Irelna volunteered as well. When Thelvok tried to stop her, she shook her head. I have watched these humans fight, she said. I have seen what they can do. If there is any chance of taking that station, it is with them. I will not let them go alone. Thelvok looked at the volunteers. The humans were checking their weapons, talking quietly among themselves. They knew they were probably going to die. They were going anyway. He thought about his career. 63 battles, medals and honors. A comfortable retirement waiting for him if he survived the war. Then he thought about what Cole had said, about hope and math and doing impossible things. I will go as well, he said. The assault on Vethcon Station began at midnight by human reckoning. The Allied fleet created a distraction, attacking the station's defenses while the volunteer force approached from below. Their ship was small and fast, designed for speed rather than combat. If the Drakthar spotted them, they would die before reaching the docking bay. They were not spotted. The ship latched onto an emergency airlock on the station's underside. Soldiers poured out into the darkness. The lights were dim here. The air smelled of metal and something rotten. Cole took point. Reyes handled communications. Burke carried his heavy weapon again, newly loaded. Grant was there too, his shoulder still not fully healed. Thelvok watched the humans move through the corridors. They were silent, professional. Every step was measured. Every corner was checked before they advanced. Then they found the enemy. The first Drakthar patrol died before they could raise an alarm. Cole killed 2 with his knife before they even saw him. Burke snapped the neck of a 3rd. Santos shot the 4th in the back as it tried to run. Clean, quiet, terrifying. But the station was huge, and there were thousands of enemies. Soon, silence was no longer possible. The battle became a nightmare. The Drakthar fought with everything they had. They knew the station was vital. They knew losing it meant losing the war. They threw themselves at the invaders with suicidal fury. The corridors ran with blood. Thelvok fought beside Irelna, trying to keep up with the humans. But the humans were always ahead, always pushing forward, always finding another way through. Lieutenant Reyes took command of the left flank when the soldiers there began to falter. She rallied them with a voice that cut through the chaos like a blade. "You are not dying here," she screamed. "Move forward, or I will drag you forward myself." They moved forward. Sergeant Burke held a corridor alone for 11 minutes. 11 minutes. Wave after wave of Drakthar came at him. He killed them all. When his weapon ran dry, he used his fists. When his fists were broken, he used a piece of metal torn from the wall. When reinforcements finally reached him, he was standing in a pile of bodies, bleeding from a dozen wounds, still breathing. "Took you long enough," he said, and collapsed. But it was Private Lucas Grant who ended the battle. The station's shields were still active. As long as they stayed up, the Allied fleet could not support the assault. Reinforcements could not land. The volunteers would eventually be overwhelmed. Grant found a way. He crawled through the ventilation system, moving toward the shield generator. He was wounded in 3 places. He had lost a lot of blood. Every movement was agony. But he kept going. He reached the generator room. It was guarded by a dozen Drakthar. He had 6 grenades and half a magazine of ammunition. It was not enough. Grant planted his explosives on the generator itself. He set the timer for 10 seconds. Then he stood up and started shooting. The Drakthar turned toward him. They fired back. Grant took hit after hit but kept shooting, buying time for the explosives to do their work. The generator exploded. The shields fell. The Allied fleet poured fire into the station. Reinforcements landed within minutes. The Drakthar, caught between the new arrivals and the survivors of the volunteer force, began to break. By dawn, Vestan Station belonged to the Alliance. Grant survived. Barely. The medics said it was a miracle. 3 wounds, massive blood loss, and he had been exposed to the explosion at close range. Thelvok visited him in the medical bay. Grant was unconscious, covered in bandages and tubes. "Will he live?" Thelvok asked. "Probably," the human medic said. "He's stubborn." "He should be dead," the medic shrugged. "Humans don't always do what they should." Later, Thelvok found the surviving volunteers gathered in the cargo bay. 18 of the original 42 were dead. The rest were wounded, exhausted, pushed far past any reasonable limit. Cole was there, one arm in a sling, his face pale from blood loss. He looked at his soldiers with something that might have been pride or grief, or both. "We did it," someone said. "Yeah," Cole replied. "We did." He was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "Who's ready for the next one?" Every hand went up. Every single hand. Thelvok finally understood. Humans were not fearless. They were afraid all the time. Afraid of dying, of failure, of losing the people they loved. They just refused to let it stop them. 3 months after Vestan Station fell, the war ended. The Drakthar had been retreating across 4 sectors. Their supply lines were broken. Their command structure was in chaos. The Alliance pushed forward, taking system after system, until there was nowhere left to run. Thelvok had been promoted to Fleet Admiral. He commanded the final offensive from the bridge of a new flagship. But he never forgot those early days, fighting beside a handful of human soldiers on worlds whose names most people would never remember. The Drakthar requested a ceasefire on a cold morning in early spring. Their ambassador came aboard Thelvok's ship to discuss terms. He was a massive creature, scarred from centuries of battle, wearing armor that had seen more combat than most soldiers would see in a lifetime. The ambassador looked at the Valorian admirals with contempt. He had fought their kind for generations. He knew their tactics, their weaknesses, their fears. He looked at the other allied species with dismissal. The Kendari were clever. The Rethnal were strong. None of them had ever truly threatened the Horde. Then his eyes found Captain Cole. Cole stood quietly in the corner of the room. His soldiers were with him, what remained of them. Burke, his hands still scarred from Vestan Station. Santos, walking with a slight limp she would carry forever. Grant, newly returned to duty, thin and pale but still standing. The ambassador stared at the humans for a long moment. Something changed in his expression, something that looked almost like fear. "We have fought many species," the ambassador said through his translator. "The Valorians are disciplined, the Kendari are cunning, the Rethanal are powerful. But we have never faced anything like humans." He stepped toward Cole. The humans did not move, did not flinch. "You do not fight like soldiers," the ambassador continued. "You fight like something that has forgotten how to stop. We destroy your ships, and you come back in smaller ones. We kill your warriors, and more appear. We push you to the edge of death, and you push back harder." His voice grew quieter, heavier. "We thought we understood war. We have waged it for 1,000 years. We believed we were the masters of violence in this galaxy." He paused. "We were wrong. The Drakthar Empire surrendered unconditionally. Terms were signed. Prisoners were exchanged. The war that had lasted 3 centuries ended not with a final battle, but with a signature on a piece of paper. That night, there was a celebration aboard the flagship. Soldiers from every species gathered to mark the end of the conflict. There was music and food, and for the first time in many years, hope. Thelvok did not stay long. He slipped away to the observation deck, the same place where he had talked with Cole so many times before. Cole was already there. They stood in silence for a while, watching the stars. The same stars they had fought under, the same stars that had watched so many soldiers die. "What happens now?" Thelvok asked. We go home, Cole said. Rebuild. Try to remember how to be people instead of soldiers. Will you succeed? Cole smiled, but there was sadness in it. Some will, some won't. War changes you, even when you win. Thelvok nodded. He had learned that lesson himself. May I ask you something? He said. Something that has stayed with me since Kethris IV? Of course. How do you do it? How do you walk into certain death and still function? How do you watch your friends die and keep fighting? How do you face fear every day and never let it stop you? Cole was quiet for a long moment. He looked out at the stars, his expression distant. We're scared, he said finally, all the time. Terrified of dying, of failure, of letting down the people next to us. Every human soldier I've ever known has been afraid. He turned to face Thelvok. But here's the thing about fear. It's not the enemy. Fear is just information. It tells you that something matters, that the stakes are real, that what you're doing is important. He took a breath. And when something matters enough, when the people beside you matter enough, you move anyway. You push through the fear because the alternative is worse, because giving up means letting down everyone who's counting on you. Thelvok thought about that for a long time. On my world, he said slowly, we teach our soldiers that courage is the absence of fear, that a true warrior feels nothing when facing death. How's that working out for you? Thelvok almost smiled. Not well. Fear isn't weakness, Cole said. It's fuel. You just have to learn how to burn it. They stood together until the celebration ended. Then Cole returned to his soldiers, and Thelvok returned to his duties. Years later, Thelvok retired from military service. He had commanded fleets, won victories, shaped the future of the galaxy. But when he sat down to write his memoirs, he did not focus on the great battles or the strategic decisions. He wrote about the humans. He wrote about soldiers who laughed before combat and cried after. About warriors who charged into impossible odds because someone had to. About a species that had climbed from the mud of a single world to the stars, carrying all their fear and fury with them. His memoirs became famous across 100 worlds, but one passage was quoted more than any other. It was translated into every language of every species in the Alliance. It was carved into monuments and taught in schools. It said, I fought beside many species during the Long War. I saw courage in all of them. But I only felt true terror once, not facing the enemy, but standing beside humanity. Because in that moment, I understood what they were, a species that had clawed its way from the mud to the stars, not despite their fear, but through it. They are afraid of everything, and stopped by nothing. If you ever find yourself fighting alongside humans, be grateful. If you ever find yourself fighting against them, make peace while you still can. Thelvok lived many more years. He saw peace take root across the galaxy. He watched new generations grow up without knowing war, but he never forgot those early days. The smell of smoke on Kethris IV, the sound of gunfire in the corridors of Vethkin Station, the sight of human soldiers, wounded and exhausted and afraid, raising their hands to volunteer for one more impossible mission. He never forgot Captain Daniel Cole, standing in the darkness, explaining that fear was just fuel. And sometimes, late at night, when the stars were bright and the galaxy was quiet, Thelvok would think about what the Drakthar ambassador had said. We thought we understood war. We were wrong. The humans had taught them all something precious, something that could not be learned from books or training or experience. Fear was not the enemy. Fear was just the beginning.